vpod.ai, your source for information. This podcast is sponsored by Stonefly, your trusted solution provider and advisor in enterprise storage, backup, disaster recovery, hyperconverged and VMware, Hyper-V, Proxmox cluster, AI servers, and public and private cloud. Check out stonefly.com or email your project requirements to sales@stonefly.com. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into it, looking at a whole bunch of information about one specific thing, passing those contractor license exams. Our mission here is, pretty straightforward. We want to pull out the key takeaways, figure out the maybe surprising challenges, and find the essential strategies this material points to for anyone who's facing these tests. Maybe that's you listening right now. Perhaps you're studying or just thinking about it. Or, hey, maybe you got your license years ago and you're curious. This is for you.
Yeah, and it's a really important step, isn't it? Getting that license. It's not just about paperwork. It's about freedom, really.
Like freedom. How so?
Well, freedom to grow your business.
Yeah.
Take on bigger jobs, hire people legally, basically create more cash flow, build something real. It's a gateway.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So let's dive into the first big thing that kind of jumps out. There's this assumption, right? You hear it all the time.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like, look, I've been doing this for 30, maybe 40 years, plumbing, electrical, whatever.
Pajamas stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm a master. I live this trade day in, day out. So surely I can just walk in there, sit down, and, ace this test, no problem.
Right. Maybe I don't even need to crack a book. It feels logical that kind of deep experience should translate directly.
I didn't think so.
But what's really striking in the material we looked at is, well, it's often wrong. That assumption just doesn't hold up for a lot of really experienced folks.
Really?
Yeah. The sources talk about people with like 42 years of solid hands-on experience who fail these exams.
Wow.
And not just once. We're talking 3 times, sometimes even more.
42 years on the job and failing 3 times. That really goes against the grain, doesn't it? It's kind of shocking.
It is, and it points to something critical. The material is super clear. It's not because they aren't good at their jobs. They're often brilliant craftspeople.
So what is it then?
The failure, according to these sources, comes down to not being familiar with 2 specific things about the test itself. 1, the way the questions are actually phrased.
Okay.
And 2, maybe even more important, not knowing their way around the specific reference books the test uses.
So it's less about can you, say, wire a house correctly in real life and more about can you navigate their specific test system.
Precisely. It shifts the focus. Which brings us to the exam format itself.
Yeah.
The sources mentioned, many of these are open book.
Right. Which sounds great, doesn't it? Like a safety net. Oh, good, I can bring the code books.
It totally sounds like a huge help. You imagine just flipping to the answer?
Yeah.
But, there's a catch. A really big one, actually. They're timed. Strictly timed. And the number one reason people fail, according to this material, it isn't getting answers wrong. It's running out of time.
Running out of time, even with the books right there.
Exactly. Because having the book doesn't help if you can't find the information fast. The material connects running out of time directly back to those 2 points we just mentioned.
Okay, let me guess. Not being familiar with the question style, so you waste time puzzling it out.
Yep, that's one. And the other is not knowing the books well enough. Spending precious minutes, flipping pages, searching for the right section, the right table.
While the clock is just ticking away.
That's it. That frantic search eats up all your time.
And I guess the questions themselves can be tricky, even if you know the subject from experience.
Oh, absolutely. The sources talk about this frustration. You get a multiple choice question, maybe 4 options.
Yeah.
And the experienced person looks at it and thinks, well, hold on. I wouldn't do it any of these 4 ways. I'd do it my way, the way that actually works best on site.
But their way isn't an option.
Exactly. Their deep practical knowledge doesn't fit neatly into the test's boxes.
That sounds incredibly frustrating. And what about irrelevant questions? Does that come up?
Big time. That's another major point of friction mentioned. People saying, I've been doing this for decades. I've never encountered this situation. Or this rule is for some niche thing I'd never touch. Or just flat out, this question is pointless for my actual job.
So irrelevant stuff, weird options, and a ticking clock. No wonder just having experience isn't enough.
Right. You're not really being tested on your job skills directly.
Yeah.
You're being tested on your ability to play their game, navigate their system, using their books, under their time pressure. It's artificial in a way.
Okay, so if real-world skill isn't the key, and the test itself is kind of designed to, trip you up if you aren't prepped for it, How do you actually succeed? What's the approach the material recommends?
Well, this is really the core insight, I think. The biggest shift you have to make is understanding this. The test makers do not care how you would solve it based on experience.
They don't care about my 40 years.
Not for the purpose of answering the question.
Hmm.
No, they're looking for one specific answer. The one written down in the official reference books for that exam. The material says it point blank. It's their answers that count, not your answers.
Wow. Okay, it's their answers that count. That's,
Oh.
yeah, that requires checking your ego at the door, maybe. Especially if you really know your stuff.
It really does.
Yeah.
You can't argue with the question during the test. You can't explain why your method is better in the real world trying to do that. Material calls it blowing hot air and wasting your time.
So no room for debate. Just find their answer in their book.
Find their answer, mark it, move on.
Yeah.
Fast.
That sounds like it needs a certain mindset then, beyond just knowledge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The sources use the word humility. Not like thinking less of yourself, but being willing to just accept the rules of this specific game.
Okay.
Set aside your way for a moment, find their way in the book, and just, knock this out. Even if you disagree with the question or the right answer, according to the book.
It's a means to an end.
Exactly. It's a hoop you got to jump through. Yeah. It might not perfectly match your daily work, but you got to clear it to get the license.
Right. So the practical strategy then revolves around those books, getting super familiar with them.
That's the absolute key strategy emphasized. Not just owning the books, but knowing them. Knowing how to navigate them quickly. Because time is everything.
So how do you do that? How do you get that familiar with, like, dense code books?
Well, first, the basics. Make damn sure you have the right books. The correct editions. Using the wrong one is a recipe for failure.
Okay, got the right books. Then what?
Then, if the rules allow it, and apparently they often do, you need to make those books truly exam day ready. That means highlighting and tabbing.
Highlighting and tabbing. Go. Okay, that sounds like work.
It is. Significant work. The material mentions it could easily take a couple weeks of focused effort if you do it yourself thoroughly.
A couple of weeks just prepping the books.
Yeah, maybe. Depending on how many books and how detailed you get. You're basically creating your own index, your own quick search system within the books. Marking key definitions, formulas, tables, tabbing major sections.
So you can flip right to the relevant part under pressure.
Precisely. And because it's so vital but also so time-consuming, the sources mention there are actually services that will sell you pre-highlighted and tabbed book sets.
Ah, outsourcing the prep work. Interesting. Makes sense if time is tight.
Definitely an option. But whether you do it yourself or buy them prepped, having those easily searchable books is critical.
Okay, books prepped. What else? Practice tests.
Yes, absolutely essential. The material stresses going through plenty of practice questions and planning practice exams.
Why is that so important?
Well, 2 reasons. Practice questions get you used to the weird ways they might phrase things, and they train you to connect the question type to where the answer likely lives in your TAD books.
Okay, gets you familiar with the question style and links it to the book navigation.
Right. And then the full practice exams are crucial for building speed and stamina. You need to feel that time pressure, practice your whole process, read, locate, answer, move again and again.
So it's a whole system you need to build and practice, not just knowledge recall.
Exactly. It's a performance skill, almost. Yeah. And the material is very clear. You can just walk in cold, pay the fee, take the test. But they highly recommend against it. The failure rates are high for people who underestimate this prep, no matter how many years they've worked in the field.
Okay, so it's a demanding process. You need discipline, you need to learn their system, master their books, even if it feels counterintuitive sometimes. Why? What's the big payoff that makes it worthwhile?
Yeah, why go through all that? The sources bring it back to something pretty fundamental. They connect getting licensed to, well, happiness and freedom.
Happiness and freedom again. Okay, unpack that connection for me. How does passing this test lead there?
It's about what the license unlocks. It removes barriers. It lets you legally do more with your business.
Like take on bigger projects.
Bigger projects, different kinds of projects, hire employees who can work under your license. It allows you to scale up. And scaling up is how you create more cash flow, significantly more.
So the license is the key to unlocking that next level of business growth and income.
That's the idea. And so all that studying, the book tabbing, the practice exams, it's framed as a surprisingly short investment of your time.
Short? Really? It sounds intense.
Well, short relative to the payoff, right?
Yeah.
The material suggests that if you're disciplined, Maybe it's just a few months of focused effort.
A few months to potentially change the trajectory of your business for years to come.
Exactly. Compare a few months of dedicated prep, maybe those couple of weeks just on books, to potentially decades of increased earning potential. Or compare it to the frustration and cost of failing multiple times.
Yeah, perspective matters.
It's a targeted investment. You put in the focus work for a relatively short period, you pass the test, you get the license, and then you have the freedom to go make your money and really build your business the way you want to.
So the core message is accept the system, learn the rules, put in the disciplined study time.
Even if you grumble about it sometimes.
Right, even then, because that discipline is the path to the freedom and the cash flow that the license represents. You play their game temporarily to win your game long term.
That sums it up perfectly.
That's actually really insightful. This whole deep dive makes it clear. Success on these exams isn't really about flexing your years of hands-on skill. It's about mastering their specific test format, knowing their books backwards and forwards, being fast, and delivering their answer.
It's a different skill set entirely. A hoop to jump through, like we said.
But a hoop that leads somewhere valuable.
Definitely. Which leads to maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Think about this beyond just contractor licenses.
Okay.
Where else in your work, or maybe even your personal life, is there a system, a set of rules, maybe a gatekeeper, a specific process that you kind of have to master to get where you want to go? Even if it means temporarily setting aside how you normally do things or what your experience tells you. What hoops are out there for you that might seem annoying or arbitrary?
But are actually the gateway to the freedom or the result you really want?
Exactly. What hoops might be worth jumping through?
That is a really good question to ponder. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today.
My pleasure.
vpod.ai, your source for information. This podcast is sponsored by Stonefly, your trusted solution provider and advisor in enterprise storage, backup, disaster recovery, hyperconverged and VMware, Hyper-V, Proxmox cluster, AI servers, and public and private cloud. Check out stonefly.com or email your project requirements to sales@stonefly.com.